things that was wrong with this Jeep when we got it is that it made a really loud, sharp, metallic thunk from the front end. And it only seemed to do this when you were backing up, which brings up some questions about U-joints engaging and maybe some gear mesh. It was pretty harsh and it sounded pretty bad. Now, we checked tight turning in the parking lot. It didn't seem like front U-joints were binding. Gas on and off. Didn't feel like a U-joint was clunking. So we're a little like, well, we're not sure what's going on with this. It could be something pretty bad. It could be in the transfer case and we need to get a new one. So we've done a little bit of troubleshooting now, and we're going to show you what we actually found out the source of this noise to be. Gonna have to thread it out. There we go. Okay, there's that one. Now this front one, still a little stuck. Wow, it's awfully stuck. All right, we're gonna need a hammer for that. Okay, so we drove this part way and now it's just stuck there. So what's happened is the bolt has rusted to the sleeve inside the bushing and it's really fighting us to come out. So now we're going to use the bolt we pulled out of the rear to help drive it through to the outside. With the smallest hammer we could possibly find.
I'm getting a real hammer.
All right, let's get a real hammer. All right, so I'm carefully holding the bolt here and hoping I don't get a crushed hand. And we're gonna try to tap it on through. Well, we got something to happen. Now it's moved through enough, now it wants to flop around. Now, all right, we got to put down the camera and do this.
Reverse is the upper part.
All right, so we drove out this other one. Now this one's stuck in, but we're going to try to get it to unthread using the impact. All right, now it's spinning a lot, so what we'll do is get the wrench on here and use that to push outward. There we go. All right, one totally blown out bushing in a control arm out. So pull this out and take a look at our new bushings and see about pressing them in. Okay, we got the control arm out and I've got a little bit of PB Blaster to help lube up this thing. So now we got to start pressing out these old bushings. So here's a pretty shot bushing. You can see it here. It's pretty well worn, but at least it's intact. But the other side, that one's just totally gone and basically everything fell out. That was the rear. So now we're gonna work on getting out this old front. So I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of blaster. This won't hurt at all, but it might help us get this out. And now This is what pipe I picked for it. I'm going to need to lower this down a bit to get the pipe on. So we're really just kind of cutting through this bushing with this bit of pipe, but this is so crumbly, I'm having trouble getting anything else on it. So we'll push out what we can here, and then clean up what's left of the bushing. Looks like the other side on the bottom is coming out intact, so it's really this side half on the top that we're breaking apart. In fact, looks like that bushing ought to be free down there, and we've now pressed the pipe into it. So let's let this off and see what we got to deal with now. So there's an old bushing. There's the old collar. And now I got a pipe that I've managed to press into here. So let me try to press my pipe out. All right, so I still have this little bit of bushing in here. Now I got kind of lazy before and used some pipe that didn't work out. And I usually use this socket set because it's got a lot of sizes and they make really good dies for doing things. So came over here, found out a 27 on this set works pretty good. Now, I didn't go and grab it because it was over in the Comanche and I was being lazy. Now it took more time than just going and get it the first time. So I got my 27, put it in here, and we'll finish pressing it down. All right, that one's out. All right, so I got a wire brush on the end of the drill here. Got this mounted in the vise, and what I'm gonna do is run this in and out and try to clean up all the rusty stuff and any of the old bushing that's still left in there. I'm gonna be able to do about half of it, and I'm gonna have to flip it over and do the other half because I don't have a very long shank on this tool. All right, quite a bit of rust coming out of there. I did a lot of good. Let me flip it over and do the other side now. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll probably do some more cleanup here, maybe get a little emery cloth out, make sure I get this good and clean. But I'm gonna go ahead and move on and get this other side cleaned up as well. So I've got both sides cleaned up. I've got out my new bushings and I'm taking a look at them, and it looks like these aren't a terribly tight fit. I can almost push them in by hand. And I'm not gonna keep going with this quite yet. Instead, what I'm gonna do is get out a little bit of my generic axle grease, do a coating on these from both sides, inside, outside, around the bushing, and I'm going to lube up every little part of this, and then I'm just going to try to push these together by hand and see how that goes. I always have the press to use, but if I can get these to go in by hand, I'm perfectly fine with that. Okay, now that I got my grease all around, my hands all greasy, and a little bit of grease down in here, I'm going to come in and just like that, I can pop in one. I'm going to go to the underside. That went right in. Now I got to get the bushing in. Well, bushing's a little harder, but look at that. Okay, and so just like that, we've got a new bushing pressed into these old control arms. All right, we got a bolt in here. Now we're going to run up and down on the threads a few times, kind of clean them up. Maybe get a little oil on there, help get off any rust. cleaned up that pretty good. So I've got my control arm ready to go. I've got my bolts through it cleaned up. And if you notice, all the silver that I've got here on the bolts is I've put a bunch of anti-seize through this. Now, I've coated the shaft of it, the inside, the bushing, all of this, so that we're trying to avoid any rust in the future. Now, if you recall, one of these bolts we had a real hard time getting out because it was actually kind of rusted into the old sleeve. So I've done anti-seize on both of these to make sure it doesn't rust to the sleeve, stays well protected, and then the nut's gonna have it. Now, what I use is the Permatex anti-seize. This is the aluminum, this is the low temperature. It's great for stuff like this. So I just make sure to put this on bolts, anything that's down low that I don't wanna have seizing up and rusting up on me before I put things in.
Yeah.
I just dropped off the rear of the driver's side control arm. And then there to show you how floppy and bad that is. There's the front. What's left of the bushing. You can see the little bits falling out down there. So yeah, these are bad. Okay, we got the driver's side arm off, which ended up being a pretty big pain. It's a little bit rustier and I'm cleaning it out. And you can see I've got a pretty good pile of rust going on over here. So I'm gonna keep going on this, and we got some more to get out. Now, to show you what the real trouble was on the driver's side, it was just one bolt. If you recall, on the passenger, we had to tap that through using the other bolt. Well, on the driver's side, we can't do that from the pumpkin, and we could absolutely not get this out. As you can see, this is the middle of the bolt with the bushing. Here's my head, and there are the threads. So I had to get in with the cutoff wheel and cut this through. Now, as you can see, it's a bushing. Our bolt's almost loose now, and we cut that free. What happens is rust gets in here, starts building up, and it spreads this out, makes everything tighter, and then we can't push the bolt through this bushing. So that's one reason I want to use anti-seize on all these things, is that with anti-seize on this, I'm going to keep that rust from building up and starting there in the future. Okay, we got those bushings in. Took a little bit longer on the driver's side. In fact, took almost twice as long on that driver's side, just even dealing with that one rusted bushing. But we got it. Both of them are in. We've checked it out. We don't have any movement going on those bushings. We've managed to quiet down that big clunk, but we can still hear a little something going on there as you're hitting the brakes going back and forth. Now, listening to it and going back, it sounds like that's the brakes starting to grab. So we'll go ahead and toss some new brakes on the front here and see if that takes care of that noise. If not, we'll be back in to figuring out if there's something else in the suspension that we need to work on. Now, we did look at the upper control arm bushings in the axle there, and when we're going back and forth, we don't really see any play in those upper ones. So they still look like they're in good shape. Otherwise, I might say that the noise would be coming from there. Still, we'll go through the brake system, and then we'll see what else we might need to address in the suspension up there. Other than that, that wraps up tonight's project. So I guess we'll look forward to what we do next.